Some people feel that Jimi Hendrix was some kind of superhuman voodoo child, or at least a child prodigy. But how did Jimi Hendrix really grow up? Hello, and welcome everyone to another episode of Hendrix Up Close. Today, we're gonna be talking about Jimi Hendrix's upbringing, his childhood, and in particular, gonna examine his relationship to his father Al and his mother Lucille. We're gonna see if there was any tight relationships with his brothers and sisters, and how his whole social surroundings were when he grew up. And we're gonna find out some shocking details. But before we get started, please subscribe to my channel and hit the bell button for future notifications. So here is what we can learn by just going to Wikipedia. Johnnie Allen Hendrix was born on November 27th, 1942 to Al and Lucille Hendrix. So he wasn't even called Jimmy when he was born. Al Hendrix was mostly unemployed and had some part-time jobs. Later, he ended up working in the landscaping business of his brother-in-law. Lucille was a dancer, so her life pretty much evolved around nightclubs. She was a heavy drinker, and she was 17 when Jimmy was born. Only 3 days after Jimmy's birth, or I should say Johnny's birth, Al had to leave because he was drafted and he had to leave to do his training and later got deployed as a soldier in World War II. For the first 3 years, Al, his father, wasn't even around. So Lucille more or less raised Jimmy or Johnny by herself and didn't do a very good job. She was a heavy drinker, she had several affairs with other men, and it wasn't until Al finally got discharged in 1945 where he finally got to see his 3-year-old son. The relationship between Al and Lucille was troubled. They were fighting a lot, they were both heavy drinkers, and usually when they would both get intoxicated, they would just be fighting and screaming and yelling. They would often move to different places around the Seattle area, live in hotel rooms, and just kind of live like vagabonds, depending on Al's and Lucille's income. Let's hear it from his brother Leon, that was born when Jimmy was 6 years old.
Growing up in Seattle with Jimmy was pretty fun for me. Jimmy was in charge of babysitting me while my father was working, late hours. There was a secure feeling about Jimmy. It seemed to be like he was warm and he was like, fatherly to me. And I always felt secure that everything was all right.
From 1949 to 1951, Al and Lucille had 3 more children, Joseph, Katie, and Pamela, and they gave all 3 of them up to foster care. They obviously couldn't take care of the children. So it wasn't a huge surprise that in 1951, Jimmy was 9 years old, Al and Lucille finally got divorced. Without a father and mother available, Jimmy needed to take care of his younger brother Leon. There are many memories that he shares about growing up with Jimmy.
And it was just me, Jimmy, and my dad living at home by ourselves. He was in charge of me, and sometimes I saw Jimmy more than I saw my father. Jimmy had a very mellow personality, He had this essence about him that was like really different. He never hollered, he never cussed, he never got upset. He was always thinking about music. And he treated me the same way. He never yelled at me. I got one black eye through my whole childhood, and I think that's pretty good for a little brother. Jimmy was shy because he was always thinking. You could put Jimmy in a room with a lot of people, and he couldn't be social because he had music racing through his brain like a freight train. You know what I'm talking about? And sometimes you say, Jimmy, are you paying attention to me? He go, wait a minute. There's just no coming through. You know what I'm talking about?
There's a story. Jimmy was in school and he must have been like 11, 12 years old. He would run around with this broomstick and pretend it was a guitar. A social worker at the school noticed that, and after 1 full year of observing Jimmy, she contacted the board and pleaded that they needed to get this child a guitar, because if not, this child would run into danger of psychological damage. They contacted Al and even offered to buy Jimmy a guitar from some funding, and Al refused. Jimmy did not get a guitar. It would take 6 more years until finally Jimmy would hold an electric guitar in his hands at age 17. But the first stringed instrument that Jimmy had available was a 1-stringed ukulele. Let's hear this story from the father himself.
My other younger son, Leon, I had to let him go into a foster home, and Jimmy and I stayed together because he is the oldest. So Jimmy and we just lived from one place to another, just various places around Seattle. Rooming houses, apartments. Did stay with my niece and some friends. So I used to do a lot of landscape gardening with my brother-in-law. And I found an old ukulele that out on one of my jobs. Didn't have all the strings, so he got strings for it. He used to plunk away on that. He got good. Of course, it's only so far you go with the ukulele.
How about that one? The world's greatest guitar player plays guitar on a broomstick because his dad can't afford a guitar. And then at age 17, he finally gets his first guitar. Out of another interview with brother Leon, he pretty much verifies what Al says.
Father, came across this old ukulele with 1 string on it. And then pretty soon he finally got a guitar, from a hawk shop for $5. And that's when he really started to, pass by the sports, pass by the social activity of all his friends in the area, and start whamming on that guitar. He had a lot of friends, but when Jimmy started playing guitar, the friends kind of was jealous of Jimmy because, they used to run around together and play baseball and stuff, and here's Jimmy, all he wants to do is pluck on that guitar. I remember this one story where me and Jimmy were at the park, and Jimmy's playing guitar on the hill, you know, in some bushes, and his friends came along and said, Jimmy, come and play, man, come and play. And Jimmy said, no, I want to play guitar. And they kept saying, come on, Jimmy, come on. And so then they kind of gathered around a little bit, and they said, let me see your guitar, right? And so Jimmy said, okay, because, you know, Jimmy was humble. Jimmy was like a really good guy. So he said, okay, here. And so they took off running across the field. And Jimmy was so upset, man. He was chasing them guys, you know, you could see the dust, you know, and the guys were teasing him, you know, passing the guitar back and forth from each other.
So even during the time Lucille was married to Al, she had several extramarital affairs and got pregnant several times as well. It is even said that Leon is from a different father. No matter how much Lucille might have failed Jimmy as a mother, he still loved her dearly. And more of these accounts can be found in the excellent Jimi Hendrix biography by Philip Norman. I'm gonna read a little bit more out of this biography. Dad was very strict and level-headed, but my mother liked dressing up and having a good time. She used to drink a lot and didn't take care of herself, but she was a groovy mother. Mostly my dad took care of me. He taught me I must respect my elders always. I couldn't speak unless I was spoken to first by grown-ups. So I've always been quiet, but I saw a lot of things. After the divorce, Lucille remarried, but her years of self-neglect and drinking really started to show on her health. And she was admitted to hospital several times, started having problems with her liver. So it was in 1958 when finally Lucille passed away from a ruptured spleen and liver cirrhosis. And she was only 32 years old. Both Jimmy and Leon were devastated. Al was supposed to drive them to her funeral, but he was drunk, and so on the way they got lost and only arrived at the grave 6 hours late. Hearing all these horrific stories, can you imagine the way Jimmy grew up? It seems like the guitar and music was the only escape in Jimmy's existence. But even later, when he was hugely successful, he always remembered his father, made him presents, gave him cars, even bought him a house. But Al did not respond with love. It wasn't until 1968 that he fully acknowledged the successes of his son, and even then he ended up being disrespectful and picking fights with his son. So they should meet one final time in Seattle at a homecoming concert in 1968 when Jimmy visited Seattle for the first time after 7 years. That show in Seattle in front of thousands was supposed to impress his father and reconnect with his family. But after the show, they got into a fight, aggravated as always by shots of whiskey. When Al saw his son off at the Seattle airport, there was no obvious sign of a bond. They were just staring at each other. And then at the end, he just told him, "Keep your nose clean." Jimmy halted twice at the runway before he finally had to step on the plane. And that should be the last time they ever saw each other. A few months later in Hawaii, Jimmy would send his father some remorse letters apologizing for their quarrels in Seattle. And even in these letters it comes out that he never felt like he was accepted by his father. So let's summarize. Jimi Hendrix did not at all grow up like a rock star. He came from a broken marriage of two poor Afro-Americans living in Seattle. So poor that they couldn't even afford a guitar for his son. It can truly be said that the guitar was the only escape that Jimmy really had available. And he carried his broomstick guitar around like a security blanket as a child. When you look at the way he grew up, it is truly amazing that he would still be able to unfold his personality and become the most successful rock star in his day and age. In many ways, you can really say that he did this against all odds. Thank you so much for tuning in today, and I really hope you learned some interesting facts today about Jimi's life. Please come back when I do the next episode next week. I'm going to be talking about Jimi's tone. Until then, I wish you happy holidays and a happy new year.